Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. We are here for the Church360 Ledger Transactions webinar. Hi, everyone. My name is Rod Kiles, and I am the manager of Concordia Technology Solutions Support. I've been with the company for years and years now, and I really appreciate the opportunity to serve churches. This has really been a blessing. If you want to get a hold of me, of course, we're going to talk about transactions today, but you may have all kinds of questions throughout the year. But if you have questions about this or something else, feel free to email me at rod.kiles@cph.org. You can also give me a call at 314-268-1315. That does go to my desk phone right here, and I can answer it and we can have a conversation and talk about it. You can also reach out to support. That's what most people do, and you can reach out to those individuals. We have 6 people on our team, so you can talk to any of those individuals. So note, all phones and microphones have been muted, so you guys can't communicate with me verbally through the webinar software, but I do have the chat window open, and also joining me today is Kimberly Moon. She's one of our software support technicians. She'll be answering the questions inside of the question window. So you can post those questions. She'll be responding to these. She was here along the way in the development of New Ledger. So she understands the software. She can answer all of your questions. If it's something that's like an edge case or something, feel free to let us know. We can look into it and get back to you on that topic. So this software was developed based on feedback from nice folks like you. So please send in the feedback. We keep track of it and we use it to make the decisions for future development. And that's how we came up with New Ledger. And a lot of the changes that you're seeing are based on those things. So, and you'll even see some things in this webinar that were based on that kind of feedback. So let's go ahead and let's go through our primary first introduction slide. We're going to start with kind of like the flow of these webinars. So I like to kind of do them all the same way. We start out with the agenda, talking about the topics that we're going to cover. Then we discuss those things. Then we have a short quiz. It's just 4 questions, no pressure. It's kind of like a neat way of doing the summary. Then if there are any questions at the end, then we have our question and answer session. So you don't have to wait till the very end. You can at any point ask a question and Kimberly will jump in and answer that question. So and these webinars are recorded and will be available at the end of the week. So let's go ahead and talk about our major points. So we're going to start out with payees and walk you through that process. In order to create a transaction, you have to have, well, for some transaction types, you have to have a payee. So we're going to start out with payees. Then we're going to talk about transaction conventions, things that are very similar amongst all transactions. We're going to go through debits and credits, the way that a dual entry accounting works. There's debits and credits and everything is in balance, which keeps your whole system in balance. So we'll talk about debits and credits. We'll go through each one of the transaction types. There's 6 transaction types now. We've added one more, so we'll show you how to create each one of those transaction types. And if there's any special transactions that you guys would like for me to create, feel free to post those in the window and I can show you how to do those. We're going to show you how to print checks. I'm going to weave that into my transaction types conversation. But once we get done with that, then we'll head out and then we'll come back tomorrow for reports. I'm excited, as you guys can tell. I hope you're excited as well. If you're ready, I'm ready. Let's get started. So we're going to start with, and I'm just going to click one more slide, payees. I don't want to skip that part. Payees is really simple. It's a thing where, hey, these are people that you are going to, people, organizations, companies that you are going to pay through the Church360 Ledger software. So Church360 Ledger has a new layout. Church360 Ledger has a new layout. Church360 has a new layout. Of course, New Ledger has a new layout with it being new. The taskbar is going to run down the left-hand side. So this is your main menu, and it allows you to access the different parts of the software. We're going to look at 2 areas today. Well, I guess technically 3 areas today. They are here on the bar. The majority of the stuff we're going to show is here in Ledger, but we're also going to go over to the offerings view for a split second. Churches will enter in batches inside of Church360. Those batches will flow over to the Ledger module, and then of course you'll create a deposit at that point in time. So we'll spend a short period of time in offerings, but there's also the settings gear here, and the settings gear, this is where we're going to start today. So we're going to go in here. Settings has been rearranged. We've grouped together settings. So we have general settings, our people module settings, our event module settings, our offering settings, and communication, and then Ledger. And then of course, we'll talk briefly about integrations, and then there's our admin section, and we'll show the event log tomorrow. But we're going to look at payees today. So click in on payees. This is the list of payees that are inside of our software. So one thing I didn't say, I actually imported this data from Shepherd Staff. So these payees were inside of Shepherd Staff, and they just rolled right into New Ledger. And you'll notice how, it's alphabetical. There's action buttons at the top. There's a filter if I want to, like if you have a long list, you may just want to filter and find the one you want to jump to. You can sort by name, and that might help you find your list as well. You'll also notice this little icon here on the left-hand side of some of the names. And one thing that we did with New Ledger was if individuals and like businesses or organizations, if you have an individual and they've received over $600 in payments, and I guess, like, hey, could be a check, could be a payroll transaction, they'll get this little icon to the left of their name. And that just signifies that they need a payee. You may have seen, I'm going to double back and go to the overview screen. You see this little icon here. It says to-do items, 6 payees needing a 1099. Now, we don't know 100% for sure if they need a 1099, but we are saying if they received over $600 that we're going to let you guys know that this person probably needs a 1099 or what we're calling a payroll summary report. So we have this list that has all of those payees. There's businesses and individuals. Whenever we create these businesses or individuals, we're going to make that designation at that point in time. And I'm going to add one here in just a second. There's an edit option that allows you to edit your payees. There's an archive option. And you may remember in our very first training back on Monday, I talked about, hey, when we migrate over from old Ledger to New Ledger, it's going to check to see if there are any duplicates. And if it is, it's going to put a random number after each one of the duplicates. So you're probably going to want to review this, especially if you're migrating over from old Ledger to New Ledger, and that will allow you to archive those payees that are duplicates. You don't want to accidentally have 2 payees running inside of your transactions, and then you're putting some transactions on one payee and some transactions on another payee. So you want to be careful with that whole process. Hey, Marilyn, let me zoom it up one notch. I may have to zoom back down, so I'm at 150% right now. Okay, so pencil, archiving records that you're no longer going to want to see, and then there's also this travel to payees detail. So let me add a payee first and talk about a couple of these buttons, and then I'll navigate over to the payees view. So I'm going to say add new, and when I click on the add new payee button, there's going to be an ignore my 1Password thing here. So 1Password is a password management software, and whenever there's certain fields, it'll put this little lock thing here that allows me to dump information in there. So ignore my 1Password thing there. So at the top, it's going to say new payee. This payee is an individual or a business. If it's an individual, you have the choice to connect it to a person that is already inside your Church 360 member software, inside the people portion of the software. So you can go down through the list and you can literally connect that person and it'll pull in all of their information. There's an option to put in a description, a tax ID, and notes. So if this is going to be a person who might be on staff, who's also a member of your church, you can go ahead and add them in. So I can save that and add in Dave here inside the software. But there's going to be lots of payees who are individuals who may not be in the software. And if that is the case, then you can just enter their information. So I'm going to add in my associate here, Taylor Brown. Then I'll put in the legal name. At that point, of course, if you're going to be printing checks, then you'll want street address, city, state, zip. You can put in phone numbers, email addresses, tax ID, and notes. All that information will populate and save here in the system. So then you just click save, and that's how quickly you can add in. The name is required to be able to create a payee. You'll fill in the additional information as appropriate. So that's how you add a payee. I'm going to add a business, and we'll call this actually business. Click business up here, and we'll call it Jim's Computer Service. Then I'll use that in a payment here in just a minute. So then click save, and then all of that information should be in here. Jim's Computer Service, Taylor Brown, all those individuals are here. So if you decide to archive somebody, so say, hey, we're no longer using that business, you can click on their record, archive it, and it simply just disappears. Like it's, the archive is going to be a soft feature, and you just click show archive and it reveals that information. The deletion part of what's going on, you can delete payees that don't have any activity on them, but once they have activity that are in your system, and we're just going to strategically hide those throughout the software. One goal was to make sure we were very careful about what we allowed to be deleted and have it to just permanently disappear from the system. So we're going to hold on to more information going forward, which allows the historical records to be stronger, to be intact, and then you can just reveal it as you want to work with that information if you want to see it. But by default, those records will be hidden. So we've got Arlene Dowling here. She has our need for a 1099 form. So I click here on the right-hand side. This is going to reveal Arlene in her, what we're calling payee detail. So Arlene, individual address, email address, phone number, and then it has recent transactions for Fund 1, and then recent transactions for Fund 2. So earlier on, I created an additional fund, the one called School. You can see transactions for both. There are some times where, hey, the person works for the church, but does something for the school, receives a payment, and then they'll have a transaction in here. So you can click see more, and then that literally jumps you over to our general ledger view, which we'll show more here later on today, but it filters it by the person. So these are all the transactions for Arlene. I'm going to go back, and this is Arlene. So see more allows you to see the general ledger view that is filtered by that individual. So you just want to do more research and see more information, you can do that. You can click on the caret to the right to jump over to this transaction and see additional payee information, transaction detail information at that point in time. So I'm going to go back one more time. We're not quite to transactions yet. And then there's a summary report. In the summary report, it has a payee summary report for each year. And we've had this data for a long time, so we have one for each year. But I'll show all of the reports together tomorrow so that we can see all that information in one fell swoop. Okay, so now that we have our payees in the system, we are ready to create transactions. So I'm going to go back to my slideshow. Here we go, payees, and after payees is transactions. And we're going to start out with transaction conventions. So every transaction must have a date. Non-negotiable. It's one of those things. Hey, here's a transaction. You got to have a date so that we can calculate our reports and find this information later on down the line. Every transaction has the option of including a memo and a line item description. Customers were very clear. They wanted to be able to log more information about transactions, and they wanted line item descriptions. So when we create these transactions in a few minutes, you'll be able to see that every single transaction has a line item description where you can fill in additional information, and then of course that information is included appropriately on reports. Will involve a minimum of 2 accounts. So we kind of changed the way the transaction or each transaction is laid out during the creation process, but it's still 2 accounts. So usually it's an asset account and then you have an offset account. But it could be 2 asset accounts in if you're doing a transfer, it really just depends. But a minimum, it has to have 2. It could be 10, but at a minimum, it has to have 2. And then the debits and credits must balance. Our software is going to make sure that the debits and credits balance, but they must balance for you to be able to save the transaction. And this is really only something you have to worry about when creating journal entries, because journal entries, you determine the debits and the credits. So any other case, any other scenario, the software is going to take care of that for you and just make it real easy. And most transactions can be done without using journal entries, but journal entries is kind of like the advanced feature that allows you to create all of the transactions, create special and edge case transactions that don't fall into checks, deposits, transfers, payments, payroll transactions. It's those kind of lesser used transaction types. Okay, so those are our transaction conventions. I'm going to show debits and credits here for a second, just to show the difference between how each of the account types handles the debits and the credits. Those people, I guess, who are dealing with accounting more, they're familiar with this chart. I keep it on my board, because there's just times I have to reference it. Assets, to increase an asset against popular belief, that's a debit, and decrease is a credit. So increase is a debit, decrease is a credit. Liabilities is the opposite of that. It's credit debits. Equity and liability are both on the same side of the accounting equation. So they behave the same way, even though they have different meanings. Liabilities is what you owe. Equity is what you own in relationship to assets. But they both perform the same way. Income, its credits and debits are like liabilities, equity, and then expenses is flipped, and then equity-based fund, credit and debit. So, and we're going to show using equity-based funds in this, but I put it as in credit and debit like equity, and that's the way it typically works. So, okay, so this is debits and credits. We have this out on our help center. Of course, you can Google it and it's out there everywhere, all over the Google. But this is the debits and credits chart. Okay, so let's do deposits. You got to have money before you can spend money. So debits are deposits. Deposits allow users to deposit money into asset accounts. So examples, Sunday offerings, rental income, etc. Whenever you receive money, you're going to create a deposit and you're going to put it into the system. These transactions are offset by income, liability, and fund accounts. So I want to say in the old version, old ledger, you could not deposit into liabilities, and you'd also say in the old version there weren't fund accounts. So and going forward, income, liability, and fund accounts. So you'll be able to deposit into those. And this integrates with the offerings module. So we'll also go into offerings and show you how that integrates. There's one little quick tweak that we made. You have to post those batches for them to show up into New Ledger. So, and some of you that have been using it have seen that, but we're going to walk you through that process as well. So, okay. So I'm going to, let's go ahead and switch back to the software. Here we go. And I'm going to go back to Ledger by clicking the $ here on the left-hand side. And across the top, we have a couple, we have these action buttons here for transaction. We'll say transaction, and then we'll go to deposit. And then that'll bring up this modal window. You guys should be able to see that okay. Gotcha. Okay, so deposit, where is the deposit going? And in the old version, you had the two sides, and for the most part, it was debits and credits, but it could be credits and debits depending on the transaction type. So what we did was we put the asset at the top, which is in most cases, that's the way it's going to be. And it's going to ask you a question. So where is the deposit going? And I'm going to, over here on my side screen, I'm going to pull up my deposit example so that I can do it the exact same way I want to. And we're going to create a couple deposits. So where is the deposit going? It's going to go into a checking or savings account in most cases. So I'm going to say Central Trust checking. And then let's say that this deposit was made on Monday. So we received the offerings on Sunday. We made the deposit on Monday. I'm saying the deposit date is November 4th. You have the option for payee, but this is a deposit, and we're not saying that this is a payment to somebody. Below our bank account here, it says divide along multiple assets. And in developing the software, and I know I've said that lots of times, but we wanted to make sure that customers still had the restricted funds capability if they wanted to use it. We've added in equity-backed funds. If you are using restricted funds, you'll say divide into multiple assets. It switches the view and it allows you to add in your multiple assets at that point in time. So if you have it broken into unrestricted and then the restricted ones, you'll just go down here and you'll select your multiple assets at that point in time. So I'm going to close this. I'm going to show how I believe most people will use the software. So they'll go to transactions, deposits. They'll select Central Trust checking, select the date, not have a payee, and then they'll go in and they'll select their income account. So, excuse me. So at that point, it's general fund. You'll say the amount. So say that it's $3,000. Then after that, the general fund, then there's the mission fund. And the mission fund, 2,500. 2,500. Then add a line after the mission fund, building fund. And all of these are income accounts that I've selected so far. Building fund, 500. And then I'm going to select an equity-backed fund. So I'm going to say our scholarship fund. And you'll notice the difference is it has income after it. So this is going to go into the income portion of the scholarship fund. And we're going to say that that's $250. So if I wanted to at that point in time, I could add in a description for Mary, and then I can add in additional lines. Now, a little bit further down the screen, you still have the option for a memo. Now, the memo represents the whole transaction, and of course, the line item descriptions represent the line item. When you go into your different account details view, you'll be able to see your line item descriptions as you drill down into like your general fund in different areas. So having a memo can be very important, but having line item descriptions can be very important as well. Then we added the ability to upload a receipt. So if a deposit, I don't think you typically would add your deposit slip to the receipt area. Technically you could, but I think that's more like when you're doing purchases with church credit cards or debit cards or stuff like that. That's when you would click on the receipt, browse through, of course you'd have to scan it into your computer, browse to it, and then upload it at that point in time. So click save, and then that is going to create my transaction. Now my screen's a little big because I've zoomed out. I will note that this zoom out behavior also represents a lot of what it looks like on your cell phone. So I'm going to show that just briefly. So as this isn't quite the shape of a cell phone. Maybe it's something about like that. But you can view Church360 Ledger from your cell phone. And this is edit transaction, copy transactions, make recurring, void transaction, print export. Those are all buttons that you saw on the other screen. And then you have all your details here and your line items below, receipts, related transactions. So one thing we made sure to do was to design this in a way that it was responsive and it would fit on different screen sizes, not just different desktop screen sizes, but also on tablets and cell phones, like we keep them in our pockets, so those types of things. So, but zooming in allows you to kind of see the difference between those. So. Okay, so I'm going to stay at 150% so that people can see it and everything, but things might be in different spots depending on how far you zoom in or zoom out or the different widths and stuff like that. So that's adding in a deposit, manually adding in a deposit. I'm going to go over to the offerings view, and inside the offerings view, this is what the offerings view looks like. I'm going to create a new batch. And let's say that I'm just going to reproduce the Sunday offerings here. So, and then typically the person will go in here, add in the Sunday offerings. I'm going to select the general fund again, general fund 3,000, enter, let's go Jacob, and mission fund, 2,500. Jeffrey, building fund, that was 500. And then scholarship fund. Oh wait, not scholarship, I need an individual. Alley. And then scholarship fund. Okay. And then that was 250. Okay. So that's the process of just creating your batch here inside the offerings view. Once the financial secretary, the offering counters, or whoever's going to enter that information in, you'll notice at the top, there's edit and post. Once your batch is done, to have this batch show up underneath your pending deposits, you'll say post to ledger, and then it'll say posted to ledger. We're going to go back to the offerings view, and you'll also see these little check boxes. These are just checks. And those checks let you know that, hey, this has been posted as well. So right now, whenever you get done with that batch, for it to show up as a deposit, you have to post it. That goes for Vanco, and that goes for any of these other batches as well. They just need to be posted for that information to flow over to New Ledger. So I'm going to click on the $ now, and now we have one pending transaction to review along with our 6 payees needing a 1099. So if I click on that one pending transaction, this would also include, pending transaction also includes recurring transactions, which we'll talk about here in a minute. So pending transaction, I can delete that pending transaction, but I can also create that pending transaction as a deposit. So if I click here, the screen will look very similar to what we've seen before. What we're going to do is we're going to deposit into Central Trust Checking. November 4th, payee optional, and you see how these are just blank? The very first time you bring a deposit over from offerings into New Ledger, these are going to be blank. What you'll have to do is you'll look over here on the right where it says General Fund, and then you'll match it up with the appropriate income account, liability account, or fund account. You only have to do that one time, unless you're changing assignments or something like that. But you go in here, you match it up, and then when you post this deposit, scholarship fund, it'll map it at that point in time. And the next time you next time you post an offering batch, it'll automatically assign general fund to the general fund. And it'll move forward that way going forward. So double check my work here to make sure I have everything, and then click save, offering batch 11.4, then it takes me to this window, and that is now here in the system. So basically I have two identical offering batches. I can go to general ledger, and underneath general ledger, let's see, Arlene Downing, I'm going to take that off. Give it a second, it's thinking right here. Here we go. Let me filter this. November 4th. And then those are our offering batches at that point. Our deposits at that point. They are the offering batches, but these are our deposits at that point. Okay, so that's how you pull your offering batch over into a deposit and post it. Let's take a look at the next transaction type. Checks. Checks allow users to print or record handwritten checks. They are used for paying payees and church bills. You can print laser and inkjet checks, and I don't know if anybody's even using, oh, it's dot matrix. People still are using inkjet. So you can print those out. The company that we work with, click right here, is Print Revolution. They have a check form that matches. If you're getting it from another company, it just has to be similar, like very similar for everything to work. If things are in the wrong spot, then it's not going to work. Print Revolution is our preferred provider when it comes to checks, and they have the layout that matches our software. So I'm order from Print Revolution. Okay, so we'll talk about payroll next. I'm going to enter in a couple of checks. So we'll go in here, we'll go to transaction at the top. I'm going to skip over payment and I'm going to come back to payment. So we'll go to check, and it's going to say what account is this withdrawn from, and we're going to say that this is Central Trust checking. We'll create the date. Let's say it's for today's date. We're going to pay our natural gas bill. So we're going to do, let's see, is it Laclede? Yep. And then it'll auto-populate the check number. So it'll provide the next check number. And checks can be, hey, we're just moving forward. We have a bunch of check stock and it's the next one. There are also people who write, manually handwrite checks as well. So you can put the number in here that you want, or you can let it pre-populate the number. You can also take the number out and then let the system assign all of your checks numbers when you get around to the printing phase of this whole thing. So we're going to say Laclede Gas 6366. I do not like that number. And then we're going to select our expense number, our expense account, and we're going to do, this is gas, so this is natural gas. And then we're going to say that it's $94.87. And then if we need to add a description, we can. We do have the option for a memo and a receipt, and then we can click save. And then that will create our transaction here. We can scroll down and see all the information from it. And of course, we can go to the general ledger and see this transaction as well. So it's pretty straightforward to enter checks. We've kind of tweaked the navigation and the layout a little bit on that so that it's easier to do. Once it's created, if for some reason you entered in the wrong amount, you could say edit that transaction. It'll pop up the window. Or if you entered in any information that's incorrect, you can then make changes. You can also copy the transaction. This is going to be the only place you can make a transaction recurring. We'll show void here in just a second, but this is where you'll void your transaction, and you can print and export this information, this view, including graphs and everything. You can print those, but export is just the data at that point. But that information can be sent out from the software as well. Okay, so this is just entering in a check. Let's transition from this to payroll checks. So then I'll have two checks to show. So this is a standard check. In the past, when you went to enter in your payroll checks, you would enter in your liabilities on the left, your asset on the left, your expenses on the right, and there was a balancing to it at that point in time. Things are going to look a little bit different with payroll. So I click on payroll and I'm going to scroll down. My screen's a little big, so I've got to do a little extra scrolling here, but withholdings and payroll details, you're going to enter in all of that information in one screen. When you create a payroll transaction, you're just going to pull it in from right here. What did you use to make the payment? So we're going to say Central Trust checking. Let's say that this also happens on the 6th. You can do these in advance, like, hey, payroll doesn't go out to the 8th. You could select the 8th, but I'm just going to do the 6th. And then payee, let's say this is Derek Woods. And withholdings are going to be money withheld from the check. And examples of those, and I'm going to do them right now: federal income tax, state income tax, Social Security, Medicare, could be FICA, could be HSA money, could be FSA money, could be 401k money, could be 403b money. The obviously the employee portion when it comes to that, but employer portion is paid in a different transaction. So withholdings, we're going to start with our federal income tax. That amount is $95.10. Our state income tax, that amount is $22. Our Social Security is $51.67. $51.67. Our Medicare is $12.08. And then those would be all of our withholdings. Then we would select our salary account, the expense account down here. So this is going to be salary. And then we would put in the total salary. So our total salary is $833.33. So then we could review what we have here, make sure all of our information is correct, add in a memo. This could be biweekly salary for Derek. And then we could click save and it would create that transaction at that point in time. It would show payroll details, the amount $833.33, and then after withholdings is what they would bring home, $652.48. And then we would see all the line items down here at the bottom. Now, when it comes to payroll transactions, the payroll transactions, did I show the slide for payroll transactions? I did not show the slide for payroll transactions. Let me read the slide real quick, and it's going to say what I was just getting ready to say. Payroll allows users to record payroll transactions. True. Transactions can be printed on check stock, which I was just getting ready to mention. Then they are limited to asset, liability, expense, and fund account types, which we just showed. And then examples are EFTs for utility bills, payments for bank fees, and then, oh, that's not true for payroll. Scratch that last line. Sorry about that. But they are limited to asset, liability, expense, and fund account types. Okay, so once you have your checks in the system, we've got two checks in here. We've got a paycheck, a payroll transaction, and we have just a check for our Laclede gas. When you go to the overview, you're going to see two checks to print. So you click on that. It's going to have those in here on the right-hand side inside our panel. You can click and then either select both of them, one or the other, and then you can either print or mark as printed. Now, if it's a handwritten check, you're just going to mark them as printed. But these are checks we're going to want to print electronically. So print selected check. Then we have the choice of top or middle check. And then there is print or cancel. So depending on what type of stock you have, some people it's check stub, and some people it's stub check stub. So the where the check is in the three-part check is whether or not it's top or middle check. So ours is at the top. You would just scan and review. It's going to show both checks here. As you look through it, does it look good? Does it not look good? Okay, it looks good. So then at that point, you'll click print. It'll say, okay, number one, number two is starting out with the Derek Woods check. If you need to adjust the check numbers at that point in time, you could type in, okay, well, all of these are supposed to be 6366 and then 6367. And then you could click print at that point in time. So this goes back to, hey, whether or not you decide you want to let the software number it based on the last check, or if you want to leave it blank and then just let it put the number in here. So sometimes people will put in numbers and it'll cause a little bit of confusion. So we're working through that whole thing. If you make a change, or if a change is made, it will say the previous number so that you can see that number and then decide where you want to go with that. Certain printers pull from the top or pull from the bottom, so you want to make sure your check's in the correct order. You might even want to print your checks on paper before you actually print on check stock, so you don't end up losing check stock. But at that point, then you click print, and it'll show you what the check will look like. And you can scroll up and down and see the second check. If it's including information like headers, you can hide your headers. This is Chrome that I'm using, but you can hide your headers and take that information off because you don't want that to print on your check. But then you can select your printer and then send that to your printer at that point in time, making sure everything's the way that it should. So I'm going to click cancel. It knows that I went to go print it. So then at that point, I'll decide whether or not I want to mark both checks as printed. If they did not print correctly, like say the printer jammed, I'll click cancel, and then I can go back and move forward at that point in time. So I'm going to say marked as printed. It'll take them out of the queue. It will close this. It'll remove them over here from my to-do items, and then my checks will show up at that point in time. There is something I also want to show about a payroll transaction. That was Derek Woods, so I'm going to say search, and I'm going to say transaction. Give it just a second. That takes me to the Derek Woods. I hit enter twice. That takes me to the Derek Woods transaction. We do have, when it's a payroll transaction, we have the print option, and it allows you to print this out. There's also print pay stub. I went pretty quick with that, but the print pay stub allows you to see a pay stub that you can print at that point in time, which is pretty neat. So you might not be actually, this is a payroll transaction. It might be electronic. So you might just be marking those as paid and then printing out this pay stub and giving them the pay stub at that point in time. So the pay stub is cool. Like, we didn't have that before, but that gives you an option to be able to print that out and give that to individuals. Okay, so that is the payroll transaction. We are going to go to payments next. So payments payments allow you to record online or electronic transactions. So checks, most cases, are going to be the paper transactions that we create either manually or through a printer. But payments are going to be online or electronic transactions. You can make payments out of asset and liability accounts, and they are offset by liability, expense, and fund accounts. Examples, EFTs, and this is where the EFT line is supposed to go. Utility bills, payment for bank fees, purchases on charge cards, etc. So let's go ahead and let's take a look at, let's go back to the site. Let's create a payment. So payment, okay. So, and we're going to create two payments. So like what I was saying in the slide, there's the option to select your bank accounts, but also I can select a charge card. So both is an option. So say I am payment, say that I'm going to make a payment and this is for our electric. So payment from Central Trust Checking. We're going to pay that today. It is for Ameren UE, that's the electricity in this area, and we're going to pay the electricity. And the electricity, $345.35. At that point, I can put in a memo line item description. So bill for September, balance paid in full. Then if I had a receipt, I can upload that, and then I could click save. And then that saves my transaction. So payments are pretty straightforward. I'm going to dismiss that. And then if I wanted to do a purchase, a payment on a credit card to a vendor, I can go payments. I can select, instead of Central Trust Checking, I'm going to select my credit card, and I named it credit card / charge account so that the concept would be consistent. Then I would find out whoever I was purchasing something from. So say I was buying a new cell phone from AT&T, and I gave them my credit card, I swiped it, and let's see. I want to select miscellaneous. We don't have a miscellaneous. I'm going to create that account. This used to have a cell phone account in it. Okay, so I'm going to cancel that. I'm going to go to chart of accounts, First Community Church, add. This is going to be cell phone replacement. And I'm going to put that underneath in my expense accounts, pastor expenses. Okay, so pastor's getting a new cell phone. Give that just a second. Then I'm going to go to transactions, payment, and this is going on the credit card. AT&T, cell phone replacement, say it was $650. It died. Then I click save. Did I put a date on there? No date. I'm going to leave the date off just to show that message. So save, date can't be blank, so it'll warn you. Those messages are what we call sticky. So if for some reason you get one of those reddish orangey messages, that message will just stay up there. And I've seen people and they have those messages up there and there's 2 or 3 of them. And I think people that sometimes just don't know that you can click on these messages to dismiss them, but they are sticky so that they stay there and you can see what's going on while you work through that scenario. So this is, we purchased a cell phone on the charge card and it's now in the system and replaced old cell phone, replaced an old cell phone, it died. So that's how you enter in a payment. I have a couple more that I want to show here. but all of these do show up underneath the general ledger view. So November 4th, so I'm going to click here and go through here and then confirm, and then all of those transactions will show up here. Okay, so let's look at transfers. So transfers are used to represent electronic transfers between banks and to make line item corrections. So they only allow moving money between similar account types. So if it's a transfer between banks, you're moving between asset and asset. If it's a line item correction and that expense account, excuse me, and you had it in an expense account and that expense account needs to be reduced while another expense account needs to be increased, then you could do a transfer. It just allows you to transfer money between two accounts. They're really straightforward. I would say lots of people use them in place of journal entries since you don't have to know the debits and credits. So say I want to transfer money from my checking account to my savings account. So I'll click on transactions and go to transfer. Then we're going to transfer money on today's date, and we're going to select Central Trust Checking. This is going to be the account the money is coming from. So we're pulling it out of Central Trust Checking. That's $5,000. Moving money to savings account. And then transfer to is going to be our savings account. So Central Trust Savings, $5,000. It automatically copies the amount down. And then description, moved money from checking to savings. I'm going to take this capital S off. So you'll always want to put in descriptions when you're moving large sums of money, any reasoning. You just want to put that information in there just to kind of cover all your bases and to communicate with the rest of the team what happened. Excuse me. Sometimes it's for your own memory as well. The older I get, my memory isn't as good as it once was, and as time passes, sometimes I forget little details. So this is one way. Hey, I put that description in there. I put that memo in there. It's all in there at that point in time. So then save, and it saves my transaction. When I go down to the bottom, I've got two graphs, one for Central Trust Checking and one for Central Trust Savings. And I can see that the money was moved at that point in time. Okay, so that is transfers. Transfers are really cool. It prevents you from having to use a journal entry to move money. And journal entries allow users to record account balances, like initial account balances, if you want to do it that way, corrections, interest earned, and bank fees. Now, most people, when they create an account, they're just going to put in an initial balance. But if for some reason you want to use a journal entry to create your initial balance, you can do that as well. But most people are just going to, when you create it, you're just going to put in an initial balance. They also use it for corrections if it's a complex correction, and interest earned and bank fees. So I'm going to show bank fees. Excuse me. As my sample here. You can utilize all account types, so there's no little restrictions to prevent bad accounting. If you want to do whatever you want to do, you can definitely do it with journal entries. And I'm going to leave this on our debits versus credits chart because I'm doing bank fees, and bank fees will debit our asset account and then credit a, no, that's correct. I reverse that. And that's why we have these charts 100% of the time and why I always access it. Bank fees will credit your asset account, decreasing the value of your asset, and debit your expense account. So a credit is a decrease on an asset and a debit is an increase on an expense. We spent more money this year, and that's why we have these charts. Okay, so transactions, journal entries, this is going to be bank fees. So today's date, our bank fees hit. No payee, so Central Trust Checking, credit, and our bank fees are $12. And then we're going to select our bank fees account. We're going to create that bank fees account. Go to chart of accounts, and I meant to use interest was the one, but we're going to add bank fees. Bank fees, and put that underneath expense accounts, miscellaneous. Can be budgeted. And I'll show interest after this one. Okay, so transactions, journal entry, date, 6, account, central trust checking. This is a credit. It decreases our asset account, $12. For our bank fees, and then we're going to debit the other side, $12. And this is bank fees for September. Then at that point, we can save it and it'll create it. That is bank fees. Let's go ahead and show interest, which is technically the opposite. And so if we did that with the journal entry, some people they'll use a deposit for bank interest, but technically it's supposed to be a journal entry. It doesn't break any major rule by doing it with a deposit, but technically it's supposed to be done with a journal entry. So to increase an asset account, it's a debit, and to increase an income account, it's a credit. So they're both on the increase side, unlike our bank fees. So I'm going to go here, excuse me, and 6. Then this is an interest earning checking account. So debit is an increase. We had $5.40. And then our interest income account, we're crediting $5.40. So then we save at that point in time, and then that puts that transaction here in the system. And all of our transactions can be seen on the general ledger view. And these are the ones that we created today. I think I put most of them on the 6th, but I did put these on the 4th. And you can see all of those transactions. I want to look at the deposits here because they have several line items, and I can click on the row, and then I can see the breakout of everything that is going on inside that transaction at that point in time. If I need to edit the transaction, I can click on edit. If I want to jump over and see the other actions that I can apply to this transaction, I can do that as well. So let me go back. And you notice that I created 2 of these deposits on that date for the same amount. This one came over from the offerings view. This one did not. So I'm going to void this second deposit. And before I do that, I'm going to show my voiding transaction slide. Voiding deletes the transaction from the system. So in the past, it used to create a reversing transaction and kind of group those 2 transactions together. A lot of people were confused by that interaction, had a hard time understanding how the balances were flowing in between transactions. So we transitioned into this situation where we're just getting rid of the transaction, and the results are audited in the event log. So when you void it, it shows up in the event log, and that's where you'll see if things have been voided or gotten rid of inside the system. Okay, and this process cannot be undone. If you void it and you didn't mean to, or it was a mistake, then you'll just re-enter that item. Okay, so I'm going to void this second deposit. I'm going to click here, and then when I'm over here, I'm just going to go to void transaction, and that's going to void that transaction. So, and I'm going to show the event log just briefly so that we can see that transaction. And we'll talk more about the event log tomorrow. But Rod voided deposit 737619 for $6,250. So, okay. So that is voiding transactions. then let's go ahead, and I want to show one other thing before the quiz, because this is going to be a question that people are going to have. So it is recurring transactions. So for customers who are migrating from old ledger to new ledger, the recurring transactions, some of them are not going to migrate over. And transactions that were created from a transaction will, transactions that were created during the creation process of a transaction will not. So the majority of them will migrate over, but there will be some that won't. To create a recurring transaction, what you'll do is you'll go in here and find the transaction you want to create. So if this is the payroll for Derek, I can click on that transaction here in the general ledger view, excuse me, and then click here on the caret, and then I can say make reoccurring. Then I can call this, and you always want to enter in a description, like just to give you additional insight for how this is going to be used. Derek's biweekly paycheck. Then every other week on Thursday or something like that, when should these start recurring? And then I'm going to put it here. And then it will recur every other Thursday. And then you can save at that point in time. So there's quite a few options there. You can every single, every other, every third, and then under week, it's week, month, year. When you're in month, you can select a day, or you can select the last day of the month. It should cover all of the options that are out there. If there's one that it doesn't, let us know and we'll figure out what we need to do with that. But you may have payments that are once a year. You can select what date that's going to happen on, but we're going to do every other week on Thursday. And then save that. It'll create the recurring transaction and it will appear here where you can then edit it or delete it if you no longer need it. Okay. So that is the information that I have today. We'll talk more about the general ledger review as a report, and discuss that information tomorrow. Okay. Okay. Let me go ahead and bring up my screen here. And we're going to go through our quiz. No pressure for the quiz. Oh, I do need to answer Roger's question. I'll make sure to answer that live here after the quiz. Thanks, Roger. I appreciate it. Okay, so we're going to launch the quiz, and you guys should be able to see the quiz. It's just 4 questions. I'll read through them. We'll give us about a minute each one. A pending deposit for the offerings module will have the total given to each fund broken out into its own line item. True or false? A pending deposit from the offering module will have the total given to each fund broken out into its own line item. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and end the poll and share the results. So 14 people, 82% said true, and 3 people, 18% said false. So I'm going to close the poll and share the answer. The answer is true. When pulling a posted batch from the offerings module into the ledger module, there will be a separate line item for each offering fund. After mapping the desired account to each line item, the next time you enter a pending deposit, the system will remember your account selection for these offering funds. Okay, question number 2. So I'm going to share the poll on that one. Okay, payroll checks will appear in the print queue along with handwritten and electronic checks to be printed. Payroll checks will, oh man, I'm going to restate that. I read it incorrectly on the screen. Payroll checks will not appear in the print queue along with handwritten and electronic checks to be printed. Payroll checks will not appear in the print queue along with handwritten and electronic checks to be printed. Okay, let's see here. Okay, I'm going to end the poll and share the results. 26% said true and 74% said false. Let me close the poll and share the results. And the answer is false. All checks are sent to the print queue, including payroll checks. To remove a check from the print queue, check the box to the left of the check and click the Mark as Printed button. So actually it's click the, oh, okay. Actually it's click the box, not the box to the left, but click the box for the check and click Mark the Printed button. Okay, okay. Next transaction, that is actually my phone ringing. So I'm gonna let that go to voicemail. Okay, poll number 3, and I'll return that call after the session. When creating a journal entry, applying a credit card to a bank account will decrease the account balance. When creating a journal entry to a bank account, when creating a journal entry, applying a credit to a bank account will decrease the account balance. This is a tough question here. This might be the hardest one of all of our questions because you kind of have to know debits and credits. And the way we think about credit here in America, I guess probably all around the world is one way, and the way the credits and debit charts works is another. So okay, I will go ahead and end the poll. That's a tough question there, guys. 93% said true and 7% said false. So I'll close the poll. And the answer is true. A credit to an asset will decrease the account balance while a debit will increase the account balance. That one's tricky because the way we think about credit is it gives us more, but really the way credit works is it takes away from your assets when you spend it because you have to pay it back. So it's a tricky one. Okay, our fourth and final quiz question. Launch poll. You can void any transaction regardless of status or year the transaction was written. You guys are on this one. Great job, everyone. And they're just, yeah, great job. I'm going to close this poll. That was awesome. Okay, share results. Everybody said false. And the answer is false. Transactions can only be voided if they have not been marked as clear during a reconciliation and if the transaction is within an unlocked fiscal year. So there's rules to voiding, and there should be rules to voiding. You don't want to throw something off, so there's rules there. All right, everyone. Do you have any questions? And I do want to read, I saw Roger's question here, even though it's been answered. Roger said, when will the Paychex and Paycor integrations be available? We're still working through the process of getting those into the software. So they're a little ways out, but they are on our radar and we plan on releasing those in the future. Ooh, hi, Ellen. Can I import payee information from QuickBooks? We are like currently right now, we are working on Excel imports to bring data into New Ledger. The payee one is pretty close. I don't want to give an ETA or a time. It's the other one's in the future. This one is near future, so it's really close with the payee import. Joseph asks, I'm going to move this over a little bit closer. Joseph asks, can more than one user be in a book at the same time? Correct. More than one user can be in a book at the same time. And the screens refresh pretty quickly, so people could be going in and doing different things. I think you would just coordinate to make sure you're not creating the same transaction twice or something like that. But more than one person can be in the book at the same time. Hey, Kenneth, I missed yesterday's webinar. Will it be available Friday? I believe it'll be available Friday. So we plan on releasing all of those at the end of the week, and it will be part of it. So we'll release all of these. Okay. And you guys, I'm not kicking you out or anything like that. I do want to thank everybody for attending today's Church 360 Ledger webinar. For any questions, feel free to reach out to us. You can email us at support@cts.cph.org. And of course, you can give us a call at 1-800-346-6120. Hi, Kim. Kim asked, I missed Monday's webinar. Where do we find New Ledger? So there's a couple of options there. So basically, we have a screen that we go to the employees here in CTS, and we can check a box, and it turns on New Ledger. And then once New Ledger is on, it shows up inside of Church 360. So you'll be able to see it within the software, and then you can migrate the data over. If you like, Kim, we can schedule a time to go through the migration process. And actually, let me show that. This gives me a chance. Excuse me. My allergies are working on me. So if you go to, and actually I'm going to paste this. Here, send to all, then everybody should get that link. So you can go to go.oneshub.com, CTS customer onboarding. It's kind of a long name. From there, you go to Church 360 members. From there, you go to Church 360 Ledger, and you click on New Ledger Data Migration, and then we walk you through migrating the data. So I think most customers are going to have us walk them through the process. You do have the option to have us just turn it on and you migrate your own data. But I think most people are going to take us up on the option to walk them through it and talk about nuances and different things within the software. But feel free to take any option. If you want to email us and have us turn it on and you migrate it, it's just a couple clicks. The video will be out with the other videos, and you can see that as well. Joseph, hi Joseph. How would we access the recorded webinars? The recorded webinars will email out a link. They'll also be presented on the Shepherd staff, on the Church 360 members ledger portion of that help center. So it'll be out in our help center as well. So whenever you're in the software, like this is Ledger, but there's an I down here. And I think we call them videos. And then we have all the videos in here. So we're going to upload them to the help center as well. And you'll be able to access them. And if you don't, like if you're here on the actual help center, you can say videos, and then it'll give a result of all the videos that we have out here and allow you to click on a video and watch it. So we'll upload them here as well. And they may be in other places as well. So Okay. Okay. All right. Well, it looks like that's the last question, and we are winding down. I really appreciate all your guys' patience and um, sitting in on all these webinars. So really appreciate it. You have any questions, let us know, and we will talk to you tomorrow. Tomorrow is reports, so it's the one that lots of people want to see how to create custom reports, and we'll show that tomorrow. All right, thank you so much, everyone. Really appreciate it. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.